You're listening to Sarah Hagan Backstage, with interviews and insights from years inside the music industry. Join Sarah as she talks with masters of their crafts, finding out what makes them tick both inside and outside of the music business. This week, Sarah talks with Ilan Rubin.
Welcome to Sarah Hagan Backstage. My guest today, Ilan Rubin, is a longtime friend of mine and someone that I just have a ton of respect for. Ilan is a multi-instrumentalist, playing drums and a host of other instruments with Nine Inch Nails, Paramore, Angels and Airwaves, and he fronts his own band, The New Regime. Today, we're going to talk to Ilan about these musical projects, what he is up to at the moment, and how it feels to be the youngest inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So let's get to it. Hey, Ilan, welcome to Sarah Hagan Backstage.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And how are you?
I'm good, thanks. And I just want you to know I love that intro. It was
thank you.
It was great. Sorry, I just hit my head with a microphone. I forgot it was there. But love the intro. Very classy. I don't know what it is about an English accent that just feels more sophisticated. But
right.
It was a good way to start things off.
Thank you so much. That was Mark Pusey. I don't know if you know Mark, but I don't,
but he has a lovely voice.
He really does, right?
Absolutely.
He is a fellow drummer. He has played with so many artists. He actually played with Ed Sheeran for a while.
Cool.
Yeah, but he's also a voiceover artist. So
it's all locking into place. It makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. It's awesome to see your face. It has been so long. And usually around this time of year, we would be hanging out at NAMM and catching up in person. But
yes.
We'll have to just settle for that.
It's a tough thing because what I've honestly felt that I haven't said out loud is that I think the only good thing to come from COVID is the cancellation of NAMM. But not at the expense of not seeing you. So
oh my goodness.
I wish we could do it.
Thank you for that. I'm actually, I think it's nice to have a little break. But I am a fan of like just seeing everybody, catching up. I feel like it's this big family reunion every year. And like not only the artists, but your friends at other companies and, just like getting to see everyone's face and go to dinner with them and, seeing you and Aaron was always a favorite part of mine. So
thank you. And likewise. And jokes aside, it's a hectic but essential part of the year. I'm still talking about NAMM, of course.
Yes.
But for those who may not know, I mean, it is the convention for the US for all things musical instruments. And as great as that may sound, just picture and visualize what it's like to cram every company in the world into a convention center, walk around with the brightest lights above you, and try to have conversations with people. And it's not very conducive to that, but it is a necessary part of the year somehow.
Right.
But, I will say, though, it's never as bad as I make it out to be or as much as I kind of envision it being. But getting to the convention center, leaving the convention center, those are the things that just always leave the bad taste in my mouth. But once I'm there and I see great friends such as yourself, it's like, this isn't that bad.
Right. It is tough to have the conversations with the noise level and like, especially on a booth, a cymbal booth or a drum booth where there's a lot of people hitting things and you want to hear, I want to hear what's up with you, Ilan, what's going on in your life. And, you have someone smashing a China cymbal right in your ear. It can be tough.
And the best part is that most of the people making the noise aren't buyers for shops or companies. So they're just hitting stuff for fun. And it's just hilarious. I mean, if you could just take out the audio aspect and just look at people hitting cymbals, really trying to get the nuances of all the new instruments, it's like, you're not even going to buy it. Well, what are you doing? Just look at it. Look at it from a distance.
It's pretty.
It's quieter that way. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But it's so nice to see you though. And
Likewise.
absolutely. So you have had a really incredible year. I know I want to talk to you about all the things kind of going on and kind of go way back and talk a little bit about your history. But, 2020, a tough year, a year of transition for a lot of people, a lot of changes in people's lives. And you've had some really kind of actually positive things happen. So, congratulations on those positive things. Do you want to talk a little bit about you recently got married, so congratulations on
Hey,
that.
thank you very much. Yeah, big step. I'm almost officially an adult.
Yeah.
So it's been a good thing. I mean, I definitely don't want to make light of 2020 as a year because obviously it's been rough for everybody. I will
Hmm.
say that I've been fortunate enough to remain healthy, and the same goes for my family. So that's all been positive. I haven't really had any scares of any kind, but it has been interesting adapting to 1 second anticipating potentially the busiest year I've ever had
Hmm.
to all of a sudden having everything completely wiped off the calendar the next day. And it is what it is. It's not one of those things that I could get upset about because obviously everybody is going through it. But aside from that, it has been a very good year for me. I am married, as you said, which has been great. We did a small little quarantine wedding with just family. And we were initially going to do it sometime this year, but with no end in sight and vaccines just starting to roll out, we thought, we don't know when that's going to happen. So let's just do it now in a way that suits the current times. And it ended up
Hmm.
being really, really nice. And that was great. And then professionally, I had the honor of being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year with Nine Inch Nails. So, like I said, I really can't complain. I'm very fortunate to have had a good year through all of this. And I will say, though, from the very beginning of everything kind of shutting off, I did see the positivity in technically gaining a lot of time.
Hmm.
And I usually find the negativity in everything. But I thought, you know what? Rather than bitching about not being able to tour or wondering what's going to happen, what can I do right now with a completely open schedule? So I was able to take the time and get into things that I've been wanting to do for a while, like studying orchestration, film scoring techniques, and just reading a lot. I like to read, but I'm one of those people where if I get into a book and it's something I'm spending a couple hours a day doing, I always think like, okay, maybe I should start using my time a little more for some productivity with career stuff, music stuff. But I was like, you know what? I have time. I'm going to read as much as I want about
There
whatever I
you
want,
go.
and just
Yeah.
have some me time, if you will.
That's
But
important though,
it is, yeah. It's just when everybody is going through the same thing, you kind of lose. Granted that you're healthy, you kind of lose
Hmm.
the right to really complain about anything because I should say healthy, and you don't have to worry about too much financially or economically speaking. I don't know.
Hmm.
Everybody's situation's different, but like I said, fortunately, I was able to just accept the gift of time and try to make the most of it.
Absolutely. And just out of curiosity, what have you been reading?
I've been all over the place, to be honest with you. I was a very good student in school, but I hated reading what was the required curriculum.
Hmm.
So all the classics that everybody read when they were in high school, middle school, or beyond, I never, I wasn't interested at the time. So let's see, I was reading stuff like 1984, Scarlet Letter, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Mice and Men, and then some other just Grimm's fairy tales. I read
Hmm.
Candide, which I enjoyed. Oh, Fables, Aesop's Fables, which, yeah, fun little read.
Yeah.
But just things where I looked at myself and thought, I should have read this, so I'm just going to do it now. But Red Badge of Courage.
Amazing.
Red Badge of Courage was a good one. And then so kind of going back and forth between classics and history stuff, which is always my favorite. So the first book I read during quarantine was a book about the Gothic Plague, Black Death, which I thought was oddly, I don't want to say fitting, but relevant in some kind of way.
Right. It is strange how like the timelines have been similar.
Yeah, it's very strange. And once again, I don't want to be seen to make light of anything. It's just my brain works where I'm like, if this is relevant, then that would be a good time to read it. So reading about that, and I'm just all over the place. I'm boring your viewers and listeners. So.
No, that's that's fantastic. I have had more time to read this year as well. Normally, I don't have enough time to read as much as I'd like, and I have a stack of books that's waiting to be read. And then
what have you been reading?
I've been reading a lot of books about business, just about successful businesses, female-owned businesses. So I've been, that's basically what I've been focused on in my small amount of free time for reading. But yeah, I do like, in fact, you mentioned Grimm's fairy tales, and I have this book. I'll have to find what exactly, I think the name is Struwwelpeter, I think it's called, but it was this book of like German fairy tales, and incredibly frightening material.
It is really funny how especially if you read the book in one shot, it's like, oh, princess gets saved and she's in the castle and now she's a queen, or it's like, I'm gonna eat your children.
Yeah,
it just goes back and forth.
Yeah. Exactly. No, that's great though. I'm so glad. I mean, I know, obviously we don't want to make light of this past year and everything that everyone's gone through, but it has been an opportunity, like you said, for people to find the positive in such a tough situation, or find like glimmers of hope and, situations to do good or to be there for other people. So
yeah, I
amazing.
Obviously wish the best upon everybody who's had a struggle of some kind, either health-wise, financially, whatever it may be, but even for the people who are just very extroverted and have had a hard time with the whole quarantining process. Because when people ask me, how are you doing? I'm actually doing quite well in terms of not going outside and seeing people, because I usually keep to myself anyway. So it hasn't been the biggest change in my personal day-to-day, because I'm either doing this, spending all my time in this room, or I'm out on tour. So obviously without being able to tour, I've just spent more time in this room than usual, but it hasn't been anything that I've had to adapt to. But for the people who love going out and hanging out with other people and meeting new people, I feel for them.
Absolutely. I get that 100%. So that's what you've been up to. Let's talk about how you kind of got started with music. And I know that you were super young when you started playing out, so a lot of people start playing drums when they're, around 8 or 10 years old, but you are like out, I think maybe even on like Warped Tour or something when you were super young. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I did start around 7.5, 8 years old, but because I was the youngest, or am still the youngest of 3 boys, now three men, I'd like to think, but being the youngest of 3, the gap between my oldest brother and myself is 8 years. So when he was in high school and started his first band, I was 8 or 9 years old, and I played in that band. So I very quickly went from learning how to play to playing in a band. And it was a smooth transition. I fortunately picked up the drums very quickly and naturally, but I also had an obsession with it. So from being able to play something to then being able to learn by ear, I really excelled within the first couple of years of playing, fortunately. And yeah, so when you mentioned Warped Tour, I played my first Warped Tour when I was 11 years old. I think it was one show at Warped Tour 99, but then in 2000 it was a week just around Southern California and surrounding territories. And a couple years later, I did a few weeks, but by the time I was 14, I was properly touring to the point where I had to check into homeschooling because
Wow.
the sort of system that the school I went to had was I could go out for 3 weeks at a time, but I'd have to come back for at least one day to turn in my work and get the next 3 weeks worth. And obviously I couldn't commit to that because I had a pretty packed schedule, fortunately. And growing up in a very supportive family and very musically supportive parents, they allowed me to tour and pursue music as a career from the very beginning, as long as I got very good grades. So I had a lot on my shoulders to take care of, but it was a good time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that taught you a lot of responsibility at a young age too, knowing that like you had these things you had to get done in order to keep doing what you loved doing. And then it's great that you had your brothers out there with you, you know, to kind of lead you and protect you and whatever you needed.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to grow up with a tight-knit family, still tight-knit to this day. And yeah, that's priceless. And as I said earlier, just being in a supportive environment is most conducive to moving forward.
Absolutely. And when you started playing or started like listening to music and getting into it, I think we have something in common with Led Zeppelin being kind of like one of the first, you know, I kind of like, I feel like Led Zeppelin was the soundtrack to my childhood. Every memory that I have that's really distinct, I can just hear Zeppelin playing in the background. And
that's
so that
fantastic.
Yeah. So that kind of like sound and that tone is something that's always like family to me. And like when I think about music in general, it just bubbles up to the top.
Absolutely. And, you know, I feel like a broken record saying this, but for those who have no idea who I am or have heard me ramble about Led Zeppelin incessantly, they have been my absolute favorite music since I was about 8 years old. And it really coincided with my playing as a drummer because my dad, having grown up in the 60s and playing music and seeing all the legends play when they came through San Diego as a teenager, that obviously left an impact on him. I mean, that was his music and that was passed on to me. But he said, if you're going to play drums, you got to listen to this. And I specifically recall him giving me Led Zeppelin 1, actually taking me to get Led Zeppelin 1 on CD. And life-changing in the truest of senses is that really did change my life. You know, a lot of people say that, but it genuinely set me on the path that my life has taken. And I just don't think I don't think there are 4 musicians on this planet who blended better and made a fifth element like Led Zeppelin. So I mean, you mentioned them and I had the biggest smile on my face.
Right. Yeah.
There's something in my DNA that improves with Led Zeppelin.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's magic. It's like a magic recipe, right?
It really is. And I can't get enough of it. I mean, to this day, my wife probably thinks I'm insane because she knows how obsessed I am with Led Zeppelin. But, you know, if she's out doing something, she'll just hear my phone going off. And it's because I'll just go through YouTube and find bootlegs that I haven't heard. And I'm listening to the same thing over and over and over again, or different versions of it. But
I love that.
I can't get enough.
I hear you. I hear you. And it's interesting. I hear a lot in, you know, your drum setup and, you know, your big drums and big cymbals and I don't know. I hear like you have such a distinct sound that's so your own, but there's something about the tone that just brings that out. Like I think about John Bonham and.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really fun. I mean, I watched, I made my wife watch A Song Remains the Same literally like 4 days ago. Because she had never seen it and she'd just heard about how, you know, either boring or self-indulgent. I'm like, it's fantastic. I mean, I get why people don't like it, but I love it. But
Right.
anytime I see the iconic Bonham with the headband and the longer hair and the mustache, I mean, I swear, when I was 9, I was like, that's what I want. I want a long hair and a mustache. But of course, at 9, I couldn't do that. I can barely do it now. But yeah, it's the most important part of my musical life for sure.
Well, we still have time. You still have time to get the headband on and,
Yeah, although I think I've gotten to that point of maturity where I'm like, you know what? I think that should stay in 1973. A lot of people don't understand that. They're like, that looks great. I'm going to do it now in 2020 or 2021. It's like, you look like an idiot. Don't do that. When
You've got your own look.
When you get off your own plane that has your band's name on the side of it, sure, dress like that. But until then, I would recommend you don't.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, like, along the way, have you met any of the guys? Or
I met John Paul Jones once, and I swear I was buzzing from that for like 2 weeks. I was like, I actually met John Paul Jones. But and honestly, I'm not the, and of course I'm sure it sounded like a giant cliche to him, but speaking to you, you'll believe me. I'm not the type of person to go up to people and just start gushing or whatever. I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for tons of people and their space and the fact that they've heard this millions of times for decades. So I don't want to just add on to that pile. But considering how important he was to Led Zeppelin is to me. I mean, the thing about Led Zeppelin is that it's not just the drums or the songs. It's the fact that for me personally, each one of those musicians is my favorite. So John Paul Jones is my favorite bass player. When I pick up a bass, I play stuff that I've learned from John Paul Jones. And when I'm coming up with parts, I often think about his rhythm and how that worked with the drums. So it wasn't just, oh, you're the bass player in my favorite band. It's you are my favorite bass player. And it was a great moment. I mean, it was very bizarre because I was playing the Lowlands Festival in the Netherlands with Nine Inch Nails in, I want to say 2013 or 14. It was one of those two. But anybody who's friends with me knows the level of my obsession. And my friend Brett, who worked with the band, ran in and said, John Paul Jones is at catering. You need to go right now. And
wow.
I'm like, that's not funny. Don't do that to me. And he's like, get up right now because he might leave. And lo and behold, there was John Paul Jones trying to figure out how to use the espresso machine. And I'm like, now's my time. And all I have from it, aside from the memory, is a very blurry photo of both of our backs. But you know what? I know it happened. And it made me very happy.
That's all you need. That's so great. A lot of people say like, oh, don't meet your heroes, and I haven't ever had that experience where I met someone that I really looked up to and it was really negative. So, I love that you took the opportunity to go and say hi and make that connection, because you have to, when it's someone like that who's affected your musical journey so much and just been such an influence. You have to take the opportunity, I think.
It's funny because a lot of people say what you've said in terms of don't meet your heroes. And that could very well be true. I've been very fortunate in the fact that few of my heroes who I have met have been exceedingly nice, beyond what I would have imagined. But to me, it kind of comes down to what you expect. If you don't expect anything, or if you know somebody who has that reputation of maybe being a bit of a dick or not nice, if you go into that scenario expecting it, then you go, well, that's what I expected. But if they're nicer than you thought, then that's always great.
It's a pleasant surprise.
There are certain people who I love musically where I would not be surprised in the slightest if they were just horrible. But if I expected that, there's nothing to get bummed out about.
That's very true, right? Keep your expectations at a reasonable level, and
you'll be okay. And that could be said as far as life is concerned. But yes, I agree.
I agree about life. That's a good analogy. Absolutely.
Treat life like a hero who might be an asshole. That's the moral of the story.
That is a quote that I will not forget. So speaking of Nine Inch Nails, I have to, we have to talk about Nine Inch Nails because that I've been a Nine Inch Nails fan since I was a kid, listening to Pretty Hate Machine was one of the first albums that I had, and I was just obsessed with the whole thing from start to finish. When I heard that you were going to be in the band, I was so excited just because, what an awesome gig. And then the first time I saw you play, I was just completely in awe because I had no idea. You had told me that you were playing multiple instruments on stage, but I did not expect to see what I saw. And, there's lots of, fog and smoke and things. So you're behind this kind of cloud of fog, but I could see you just like moving from one thing to the next, and you were on the drums and you were on keys and you were playing bass, I think. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, how is this happening? How is he doing all this? And it was so fantastic.
Well, thank you. Honestly, if I were just the drummer in Nine Inch Nails, that would be more than enough. And that's my title within the band. But Trent he certainly was the first, but he's been somebody who has appreciated my other skill sets and talents. And the reason why I mention that is something that's very important to me, is that in bands prior to that, which were obviously much lesser, you had these egos that were threatened by my abilities elsewhere. And it was kind of like, you stick to the drums, don't pick up the guitar, don't pick up the bass. Not that I ever expect to do that stuff on stage, but generally speaking, it, for whatever reason, made people feel insecure. But upon joining Nine Inch Nails and showing Trent at the time what was going to be my first New Regime release, he was impressed with it, and I suppose my abilities, and utilized them. And it was great to say, okay, so you can play piano, you can play this, you can play that. What if you did this during that song? Or what if during March of the Pigs, you played the piano and ran back to the drums? What if you played guitar on this, or whatever it may be? And as the years progressed and we went from one cycle to the next, he kind of just kept piling on to those responsibilities. And I love them. It's something that makes Nine Inch Nails incredibly exciting and fulfilling, especially from one show to the next, because if there's ever been a band that is capable of changing things very drastically from one night to the next, it's Nine Inch Nails. And not just me, but each of us on stage have to carry an additional responsibility of making that versatility and variety possible. So I recall on the Tension Tour in 2013, Pino Palladino, who is an exceptional bass player, obviously. I mean, the guy's legendary, but he played on the Hesitation Marks album. And to make that tour something unlike any other, the band was expanded to an 8-person lineup, I believe, and he came in on bass. And because the bass was so important to the songs off of that album, when the tour continued the following year, we still needed to play those songs, he came up to me and said, do you think that you can play these songs on bass? And my answer was, yes, I can. I'll get the stems and I will learn them. And I'm certainly not comparing myself to Pino in any way, because that guy has an unbelievable feel that is only he can do. But the fact that Trent would come up to me and say, can you play these bass parts? I said yes, and then we rehearsed them, and that is now part of my responsibility to play bass on these songs live. It's just always exciting, and that has extended itself to acoustic guitar on one bridge of one song, to piano here and there, to even some cello stuff. And that was a challenge that came out of nowhere, but I'm not one to back away from a challenge. So Trent actually got me lessons that would take place after rehearsals.
Wow.
And I learned I'm certainly no virtuoso, but I learned what I needed to learn, and it was great.
I had no idea that you weren't, just a cellist, like
No, it's funny because a lot of people know that I play piano, and they assume that maybe that was my first instrument, and then no, I
Mhm.
wanted to go do something cool and play drums. And it was the complete opposite, where I started as a drummer, and as I grew up, I was like, I really want to learn how to play the piano. I mean, I have a huge interest because of my love of classical music, and I use classical as a very broad term, but I just love any kind of classical instrumentation. So, I mean, I'd love to spend all the time in the world learning and playing more. In fact, at the beginning of this quarantine, I bought myself a clarinet because I was like, you know what? I don't play any sort of wind instrument. But then after doing that for 3 or 4 days, I was like, I should probably use my time better. And
I love that though.
it's the trap I always run into. I'm like, now I have time, and then I use it, and I think I should use my time better.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's the clarinet, I can't imagine making a transition into clarinet from drums or string instruments. But I did
it's
just
funny
see.
because you would know that Trent is a great sax player, and a
Really?
lot of people are surprised by that. And I certainly was when I found out. But there was some saxophone on the last few releases that he did, and on the 2018 run, maybe a bit on the 2013-14 run, he kind of brought that out from the shadows and played sax on stage. But he does a great job. I was like, you know what? I don't play any kind of woodwind or brass instrument. So I thought, the more you know.
Right? I think
Yeah.
that's great. I think that I think you can do it. You keep at it. You can. The flute,
I'll
I
work
think,
on it.
right? I think the flute is that one instrument that I'm like, I don't think I could ever, master the flute. It just seems like
Do you play at all the flute, or is this just like an
no.
elusive instrument that
Just
you're
yeah,
intimidated by?
just thinking about instruments in general, like wind and brass instruments, and I feel like that's just I don't know, like that just seems elusive to me. But
Well, I think you should
um,
try it. It can't hurt.
you know what? Maybe in the free time, I'm gonna stop my reading and my my small amount of free time,
And
and I'll pick up the flute.
as you know, by visiting NAMM so many times, there is a whole industry of cheap instruments for band kids who are going to quit in 3 months. So you can probably get one for like $90 and just have at it.
I might just try that. And
Yeah.
I did just see an Instagram post by Benny Greb. I don't know if you saw that, with him playing trumpet. And I was
I did
like,
not, but I will go look it up.
check that out. He was really good. I'm like,
Yeah.
hidden talent I had no idea about. But yeah, it's amazing though. I love that you're just like, well, try the clarinet.
Yeah.
But we've talked a lot about how like your passion for music has just it's kind of taken over your life. Like that is your passion, and we did a few years back, we filmed a project that hasn't seen the light of day yet, but maybe it will at some point.
Maybe one day.
And it was talking to drummers and filming drummers about learning more about their passions and what they're into. And I remember talking to you about the concept on the phone, and it was the funniest conversation because I explained, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to come to San Diego and film you. And you were like, yeah, but like music is my thing.
It's about your other interests outside of music. It's like,
yes.
What other interests? I don't know what you're talking about, but
exactly. But yeah, you're like, that is my interest. That is my passion. So
that's all I do.
Which at the time we were like, well, then that's what we're going to film. That's what we're going to talk about, is that your passion for music is the thing that like kind of rules your life. But then after that, maybe a year later, I saw you at a show in Boston, and we were hanging out after the show and chatting and catching up. And the topic of tennis came up.
Yes.
And I have to bring this up because I was just like, what are you into? And you're like, no, I'm really into tennis.
Yeah, I'm still really into tennis. I mean, that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. That's going to be one of those things that I really wish that I picked up sooner in life, but better late than never. And I absolutely love it. I don't care about sports, to be honest with you, but tennis is an incredible sport game on so many levels. It's obviously physically demanding, but it's very strategic and cerebral, and I enjoy the one-on-one aspect where it's like the best man or woman wins. Whereas with team sports and being from San Diego, I've seen the city just be disappointed every Sunday for a Chargers game, for example. And I found it hilarious because I'm like, they're going to lose. Somebody on the team is going to blow it because it's the Chargers or the Padres or whoever. If anyone from San Diego is watching and is just taking in my negativity for San Diego team sports, they'll either agree or they'll be mad because they agree. But still, the team sport, hey, if everybody wins, great. But if somebody blows it for everybody else, everybody's got to take the loss. So as far as tennis goes, I love that one-on-one aspect where you have to figure out how to beat the other person. It's not just a matter of who's a better player, which obviously that'll lead to a victory, but everyone has their strong suits and their weaknesses, and the strategic, almost chess-like strategy of figuring out how to take advantage and what kind of traps to set. I mean, it's a great game, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. But I initially picked it up as a form of exercise because I hate exercising, like working out. I mean, clearly it's not like I'm in the gym ever, but I hate it. And I thought, you know what, I should do some more exercise. But tennis seemed fun because I enjoyed watching matches with my dad. I mean, he still watches matches, but growing up, I always recall him on the couch watching a tennis match. So I began to enjoy watching them. I thought, you know what, this would be fun to actually get into. And my obsessive nature led me to becoming obsessed with tennis. So
yeah, and I agree with exactly what you said. You're kind of responsible for yourself in the game of tennis, and kind of like sizing up your opponent and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then kind of making moves from there. It is pretty chess-like.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine being a soccer player or a football player, both American football and global football, but playing a great game and then the goalie lets one pass and you're like,
I know.
After everything I did, you just let that ball go.
Right. That's hard.
It's leading up to this field goal and you missed it. I mean, it's just painful.
That it is painful. I like to watch team sports. I was, I took the music route in school, so I wasn't in any sports, but yeah, that's so interesting about tennis. And you were very serious about it. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is serious.
Yeah.
Do you get to play when you're out on tour? Do you have any like band members who you can play with or crew members?
I have actually been able to play a good handful of times. It's something I would love to do more consistently, but as you know, when you tour, it's kind of hard unless it's a day off to find the time and the place to do it. And even then, finding the place to do it can be very difficult.
True.
My parents' kind of version of a vacation is picking somewhere I am in the world and watching the show. I mean, they've seen more Nine Inch Nails shows than probably anybody. It's crazy, but they love it. And I love them coming out and watching, but tennis was something we took advantage of because my parents went to Europe a couple of years ago when I was out there last. And it was awesome to play in all these different cities and all these different surfaces. And it was just awesome. I playing tennis in Hyde Park or on top of some mountain in Zurich. And it was just awesome. I loved it. David Kennedy from Angels and Airwaves and I played, and unfortunately I lost. But that guy's like 6'6" and has a wingspan of like 20 feet. So once he gets up to the net, it's game over usually. But yeah, and then a lot of friends on the crew and Nine Inch Nails were tennis players, so I was able to get some games together. But the hardest part about tennis is finding somebody to play with.
Yeah,
so I would imagine. I wish I could play a lot more, but it's difficult.
You might like boxing. That's kind of a similar where you're responsible for yourself and there's a lot of strategy involved.
I feel like I'd get so pissed getting punched in the face. And then I would start like just doing it out of anger, and then technique and strategy would go out the window, and then I'd get hit more, and then it wouldn't go well. But I've heard it's great exercise, and I'd certainly rather box than, I don't know, plank.
Right.
Yeah.
I did just have a visual though, because you may be able to bring back the Bonham look in tennis. You could have the red bandana, and that could be your signature, tennis style. Something like that.
It's something to consider.
Yeah.
Something to consider. I'd probably end up looking more like a brunette Bjorn Borg or something, but you never know.
It would be entertaining either way. So then let's talk about something else that you are really into and passionate about, which is your drum company. And I am loving the posts. I think you just posted about, was it a bell brass or cast bronze?
Yeah, cast bronze snare drum. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because yes, I have been a co-owner and partner in Q Drum Co. for, I don't know, 8 years now. Probably around 8 years now, maybe a little bit more, or a little less. But I do struggle personally with the self-promotion, and it's not something I like to constantly put out there and bombastically approach people with. But Jeremy and Max at the company, Jeremy's my partner. He actually started the company, but they just make phenomenal stuff. And the drums are incredible. Snare drums have been kind of varying more and more into different types of materials and production techniques. And the company is just fantastic. And it's something that I wish I could just get out there more and more and more. But for whatever reason, I kind of have some sort of modesty or don't want to appear a certain way in terms of, shameless promotion, which so many people are good at these days. And it's a skill, but I'm glad you mentioned it though. But yeah, I mean, I made a post the other day of this cast bronze snare drum that is fantastic, and I've used it on a few sessions lately. But for those who don't know, I'd comfortably say that Q Drum Co. is probably known as the boutique company who makes drums out of various metals, whether it be copper, stainless steel, brass, galvanized steel. But what makes them so unique is the fact that it isn't quite that simple. The shells are rolled out of these materials, but there are maple reinforcement hoops on the top and bottoms with perfectly cut bearing edges. So you have the heads sitting on wood, but resonating through these metals. And it makes one material to the next sound very different. And they're very exciting, but people are always kind of taken aback as to how warm and precise they sound. They're very focused. But I'm very proud of the drums. And I do have, we make plenty of wood kits. I have a couple of mahogany kits, which is my favorite wood material as of now, and has been for a good while. But I have a mahogany kit that I picked up a few weeks ago, and that's kind of become my sort of jack of all trades session kit. But I actually just got a shipment in today from Remo of different heads that I wanted to try, and I will go to a space next week and set up and just have a good time, which is not something I've done in a while. I can't play real drums at home, unfortunately, because neighbors would become homicidal, which is why I have these V drums back here. But I only use them for songwriting and demoing, because I just kind of go USB out of the interface into the computer, and I get to use all these great sound libraries like Addictive Drums by XLN is something that I've really enjoyed. Superior Drummer 3 by Toontrack is great. But anyway, I digress. But actually, I mentioned Toontrack not too long ago. I was kind of scrolling through presets and different snare drums, because often when you go through preset kits, on software, you'll like most of it, but you might want to swap out the bass drum or the snare drum. And I ended up kind of toggling through things. I'm like, this snare drum sounds great. 14x8 copper Q drum co. I was like, wow.
Yay!
That's great.
How great is that? That's like the ultimate, yes, I did it,
It was really cool. But like I said, I don't build. In fact, the one time I tried to help, I think I stripped a screw and slowed down the process. But Jeremy and Max build phenomenal drums, and I mean that. And I'm very proud of the company. And we've established a great reputation. We're just at that point where we're growing and growing, but to really get to the next level and say, invest in a bigger space or different machinery, we're having to kind of figure out the financial strategy for that, with especially during all of this.
Absolutely.
People are not really in the market to just go buy a drum set right now, but somehow business has been somewhat positive, and we're making great stuff, and I'm very proud of it.
Absolutely. And you should be. And I think, when it comes to the self-promotion thing, I know that's hard. But you do it in a really authentic way. This is what you're playing, this is what you're into. And I think people really want to see that. So, don't hesitate to share when it comes to that stuff, because all of us gearheads out there get excited about it. So
well, thank you. But
absolutely. And, talking about the creative process, I'm imagining how your ideas and your sound thoughts and your sizes and everything kind of go into that process. So maybe you're not like actually assembling things, but, just having that experience of working with artists and listening to what they need sound wise, seeing that created into a product that's, your piece of that puzzle is essential, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, what's great is that Jeremy and Max have the know-how of when somebody says, this is what I'm looking for. And they will know how to translate that into either bearing edge angles or choice of material, depths, so on and so forth. I mean, fortunately, I know what I like as a result of having played drums for most of my life. But it's an incredible skill set that they have and knowledge of the instrument. Because look, to be completely honest with you, I think the drums, as far as construction is concerned in the instrument, are probably the most boring in the sense that they have not changed much in a very long time. It is a cylinder and there's a piece of plastic on top of it that is tightened until it sounds decent.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I saw what Jeremy was doing with these metals. And at that point, the first kit he built was made out of galvanized steel. And you look at it, or you have this preconceived notion of what it may sound like, but when you actually sit down and play them, it wasn't what you were expecting. And it leaves a sort of imprint on you as this is something special. This is not just a gimmick. And unfortunately, because the construction of drums is relatively simple, you have so many nonsense companies out there whose forte is outrageous finishes and bizarre things. And initially being, for example, an OCDP artist since I was about 12 years old until Q Drum Co. I mean, they were the beginning of extreme sort of custom drum design, and they were the forerunners of that, and they did a great job. When perhaps the company kind of fell out of the limelight in some way, or just naturally so many competitors rose to the surface, almost everybody just stole their playbook, and that lost its appeal. So you have all these companies out there who all they try to do is to do something that's striking to the eye, but it doesn't really have it where it counts. And that being said, you can have a lot of great custom drum makers who don't care about the aesthetic, and they just make great drums that look like drums. Q Drum Co. and what Jeremy was doing with the metal, I mean, they look incredible. Just as a plain kit. I mean, if you look at a plain copper kit, they look beautiful, whether they're brushed or they're polished. they look great. But the fact that he can take it beyond that and do all these incredible things with patinas and hybrids of all these designs, metal inlays on wooden drums, just very subtle, classy things where they make you look at them and you appreciate the detail. But it's not just about shock factor. And
So I want to talk a little bit about your routines. One of the things that I thought was such a great kind of pre-show warm-up routine was your Beatles book.
For Voltare, so all that fun stuff.
I love that. I don't know if you'll talk a little bit about that.
It's good to clarify because I don't want people to think that right before I go on stage with 9 Inch Nails that I'm singing Beatles songs in the background with my acoustic guitar. But
directly before you walk out onto the stage.
I literally do it. I hand the guitar off and I run to the drums. No, but I mean, with the new regime being the singer and guitar player and harmony being an important part of that, I mean, it's great to warm up your voice, and scales and all that stuff is fun, but it's not as fun as just singing. So I like to start that way with the technical exercises for a little bit. And then I just love picking up a guitar and then kind of picking a few songs that slowly increase in range just to kind of wake up the voice and whatever. But like I said, new regime, there are a lot of 3-part harmonies. So I wrangle the other guys into singing with me, and I'm sure they have fun. I'm sure part of them hate me because of it, but it's great to just go, oh, what song has a good 3-part harmony? And I'm moving away from the Beatles repertoire here, but like, oh, Fat Bottom Girls, that'd be funny. Let's do it. It's fun. And we sing that 3-part harmony. It's great. Oh, what other Queen songs are there? Let's learn the We Are the Champions harmonies. And and it's so much fun, but it's great because it also teaches you the way these great harmonies were constructed. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not like, oh, if you're a good singer, you're good at singing in harmony, because that's not necessarily the case. What is interesting about harmony is that your ears have to listen to your pitch and to the other person's pitch. And it's just a good exercise, both vocally and orally. What would we say?
Yeah.
With your ears. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Orally. Exactly.
So, and especially as a 3-part harmony, you're really kind of finding your way in there, and it's a good discipline because let's say, so for example, Rob Ketchum, who plays drums with me in the new regime, and I have the highest voices, and fortunately he can do all my borderline obnoxiously high harmonies. And Campbell, who's been playing bass for the last year and a half or so, he has a sort of lower to mid-range voice. So whenever I kind of distribute parts to these guys, I go, okay, you get the mid one or the low one, I'll take the mid to low, and Rob will do the high one. But it's an interesting exercise when you swap those harmonies around. You then have to sing something else, and your ear will often go towards what you're used to singing. So it's just a good discipline. And I don't know, I feel like singing in harmony with other people is sort of like a lost art form in popular music, unfortunately.
I agree. Absolutely. I think that's, besides drums, the lyrics and the vocals are always something that I'm drawn to. And so whenever I hear something that has great harmony, there's just something, that kind of like pulls me into that. And I agree. And I think, something you said earlier about the classical music, also, like just thinking about the bands that we've talked about in this conversation and bands we've talked about in the past, all have instrumentation that it might be rock music, but it's almost orchestral. There's something orchestral about it, right?
Yeah.
I saw Led Zeppelin. I saw Page and Plant, I should say. I did not see Led Zeppelin.
What year did you see them? Was it 98?
It was in 90. I want to say 96, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe it was 98. I'm not sure.
I
But
believe they played in 95 and 98, and
okay.
95 could have gone into 96. I
Yeah.
saw them in 98, and I told you this, but I did see Led Zeppelin in 07, or
Yes.
the closest thing to at the
Right.
O2. But continue. I'm sorry.
Amazing. No, I just wanted to say that they played the Boston Garden, and it was they played with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and it was
Oh,
amazing because I
that
was
is really cool.
yes, absolutely. And I was just kind of like, I was a teenager and just kind of like starting in my own band, and to hear like that orchestration and this rock music and, the violins, it was just so beautiful. And I think a lot of the music that I'm drawn to, even if it's rock or heavy music or progressive or metal, there's always a symphony of sounds in it. That draws me in.
Did you see them with what would have been that sort of unleaded thing that they did for MTV? Like, what was it, broken down, or was it like full on rock band with the orchestra?
It was rock band, full on rock band. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look it up because it's going to drive me crazy. It was one of the first concerts I ever went to, actually. I think it was maybe like 15 or something. So good though. But yeah, I think that's a really good tip though about warming up your voice. Using that, vocal harmony idea. And Queen, of course, so fantastic. Yes. So
yeah.
I remember growing up and not realizing that so many of those songs that I loved as a kid were Queen. I would hear a song and, who's that? Oh, that's Queen. Oh my gosh, that's Queen too,
And what's amazing about them vocally is you could listen to other great harmonies from other bands, whether it be the Beatles or Beach Boys. And if you listen to the vocals a cappella, they still sound great. I'm not knocking them in any way, but you can hear, you're like, ooh, that's not as on as I thought it was, without the surrounding music. Queen could not have been more precise. It's unbelievable how precise they were.
Yes.
Technology couldn't have made it any better. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely.
And I can't get enough of it.
Did you see the, what was the name of the documentary? I forget. The documentary-ish movie recently.
The historically false
yes.
Bohemian Rhapsody movie. You know what pissed me off about that movie?
What was that?
The thing that would have been the hardest to get, Rami Malek did a great job. I'm like, wow, good for you. Great job.
Yeah.
The first thing goes like, who the hell is going to play Freddie Mercury? And they do that. And then there was just so much that was historically wrong about it. And it bummed me out because I knew too much. Now, that obviously hindered my ability to treat the movie solely as a movie. And I know it wasn't a documentary, but throughout the whole thing, I was just like, why are you playing that song on stage on a tour that was 3 years before the song came out? Or why are you saying you did this when you didn't do it until a few years later? Just the whole thing chronologically was wrong, and it was driving me nuts. Now, conversely, when I saw Rocket Man, I really like Elton John, but I don't know nearly as much about his history as I do other people. So I was kind of able to just watch it and not critique or judge what was right or wrong. That's why I'm well aware that the Bohemian Rhapsody movie could deserve more credit than I'm giving it. I give Rami Malek all the credit in the world.
Right.
But as a movie, I'm like, why did you guys do that?
Yeah.
Why? That didn't help the story at all. In fact, I thought that their real story would have been way more interesting.
Right. Why not just tell the real story, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that I did enjoy about that movie was the glimpse into the songwriting process. And who knows how accurate that part of it was. But the, sequestering in a house, away from everyone, and the adding parts to it and all of that, I thought was, it was interesting, not from a historical perspective, but just from like a conceptual perspective. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of other things that were bothering me about it. Like
We'll not talk about that.
I think when they were coming up with "We Will Rock You" in this movie, Freddie Mercury had already made the mustache transformation. I'm like, guys, you're like 3 years off. Okay, that wasn't how it happened.
Okay, so whoever wants to make an actual documentary style movie, they need to talk to you. Clearly.
Yeah, Brian May and Roger Taylor obviously don't know what actually happened, so they need to talk to me so that I can be like, guys, you didn't tour South America until 81 or 82. That's just wrong.
You're not remembering correctly. Yeah. Mustache is off. We need to make up.
What I will say, like, because I mentioned, I think their real story was more interesting. They had a thing in there where the name is slipping my mind right now, but Elton John's manager became their manager. And in the movie, if I recall correctly, it was like, Elton John's manager is going to manage us now. Yay.
Right.
But really what happened is they signed this bizarre sort of production deal where they ended up getting screwed. And as they were becoming a big band and globally successful by sheer heart attack, they didn't have any money. So they got this guy to basically bail them out of the deal. I think they had to pay about £100,000 or whatever it was to get out of this deal. But that guy, and unfortunately the name is slipping my mind, but he said, I will deal with the business. You guys do the best album that you can possibly do. And that was A Night at the Opera. That is an interesting story. That is. Rather than the fairy tale, now we're on our way, boys. Yeah. But, what can you do?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It kind of was Hollywoodized, I guess, but
yeah,
if that's a word.
What can you do?
Yeah. Well, you can call Ilan Rubin and have an accurate movie done, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what needs to happen. Whoever's out there listening, make the call.
Yeah.
And just to talk about rock while we're on the rock and roll subject.
Sure.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What an incredible, when I heard of the news, I was just like so incredibly excited. And I think it was one of those things like, don't say anything. It hasn't been announced yet. But I was like jumping around because I was so excited because it's just super cool.
I have to say, and this is looking at it in the very short term, but professionally speaking, that more than made up for the horrible year of 2020.
Right.
And like I said, that's just professionally speaking. But looking at it in the long term, it was something. It was a lofty goal that I had for myself. Of course, a lot of people say, "Oh, one day I want to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame."
Yeah.
For what it's worth, but all of my heroes are in, and it's something I've known about since I was a kid. And I always thought that would be a great thing to accomplish. I didn't think I'd do it at 32 or be the youngest ever or whatever it is, and I honestly didn't expect to be in myself because I've been fortunate enough to be with Nine Inch Nails for about 11 years now, but 11 out of the 31 years that Nine Inch Nails has been around, I mean, Nine Inch Nails is Trent. So I wouldn't have been surprised at all if it was just him being inducted, but he and management felt very strongly that a handful of people should be inducted along with him, and they fought for it. And I distinctly remember getting the call. I mean, granted, it was only like 6 months ago, but still, of Trent saying, I got some good news for you. I'm like, well, that's a refreshing change. What is it? Well, you're personally being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Congratulations. And that was amazing. And I've got you can't really see it, but I got my piano's over here, and I have the trophy up on top of it. And it catches my eye and I go, that's awesome. But I am proud of it for what it's worth. And it does feel to be an honor. So I'm happy about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an incredible honor. I'm so happy for you, and it's so deserved. And, I definitely, I wish that it could have been one of those in-person, rock and roll induction ceremonies that I know you were looking forward to. And I know we talked a little bit about that, but I'm sure that it feels so fantastic just to have that honor. And like you said, to be able to look up at that and,
Yeah, it is unfortunate that it wasn't the typical scenario that you envision, which is all the bands in some room somewhere and either playing together or at least everyone playing in turn. And it's okay. Obviously, this is an unprecedented year for us, everybody, but it was tough because the initial call I got about Nine Inch Nails being inducted was in January. So the Hall of Fame ceremony was supposed to be sometime in May, I believe. And then that got pushed. And it was originally going to be in Cleveland. And they were talking about potentially doing it in LA. And then eventually it just said, okay, we can't do it. It's going to be a documentary type thing. And that's that. But how could you possibly complain about being inducted but not being able to play? I mean, it's an honor nonetheless. So I'm very happy about it.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Ilan. I so appreciate your time. And, I'm happy for you that these really positive things have happened in your life and your career recently. And I look forward to, the future. Do you know anything that's coming up for you as far as time frame wise? I know everything's kind of been pushed again this year, but are there any tentative future plans happening?
There are a lot of tentative future plans happening. I think they will only be able to unfold depending on the state of the world. So I'm once again keeping myself busy in this room. But my solo music, Angels and Airwaves, is in the process of, or has been in the process for a decent amount of time now, finishing up an album. And I'm still learning all the things that I've wanted to learn and applying that to what I do on a daily basis. So I'm definitely well occupied, but in terms of anything that I can really discuss, we'll have to see what the world is looking like in 5 or 6 months.
Absolutely. We'll have to stay tuned, and we will be looking forward to your clarinet solo on the next Nine Inch Nails tour.
With the right amount of fuzz, I think it might work.
Distorted clarinet. That
Absolutely.
Could be, right?
Yeah,
it could
clarinet.
Be a thing.
And if it doesn't go as planned, I can just break it.
That is true.
And that'll work as well.
Snap it. Yeah. Thank you again. And you take care, and hopefully we'll be seeing each other in person again soon.
I hope so, sooner than later.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in today. Join us each Tuesday for new episodes of Sarah Hagan Backstage.